Hi, welcome to the final Love Brave video 6. Today we're going to talk about real love. Matt, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about real love, and I think this is one of the issues that God wants us to grasp most clearly in the scriptures. He talks about relationships between people, and specifically the love relationship, the relationship he created, marriage, to reveal his love for us. And so I think when we dive into this topic today and the love we have, and the love God has for us, we're going to be able to see how the attachments, the issues that we have in this world today, they all steal this real love from us. And if we can begin to wrestle with and grapple with some of those issues, we can begin to see more clearly just the extent God goes to share his real love with us.
Yeah, totally. I also think we're going to talk a fair amount about friendship because I think this plays into it. I think we have really weird culture ideas about friendship and what that looks like, both in and outside of marriage for people who are single, for people who are widowed. We have expectations involved with it. We have friends with benefits. We have like a really just weird overlap, I think, of these different kinds of love that God gives us. Things aren't real distinct. And so I think when that happens, and lots of life is gray, right? Especially when we're talking about stuff that God is teaching us and growing us in and stuff. But we also need to begin to define some things for ourselves and search deeper. But in our culture, we don't do that. Instead, we're just like, I just happened upon a relationship and what is it? And we don't define anything, and that's not real helpful. And God does value boundaries as much as he values, open relationships and conversations that we can grow in. So we're going to dig into that.
Yeah, certainly. And one of the things I kind of chuckle with recently as we think about real love and relationships, not only the relationship between man and woman, but the friendship relationships that you mentioned, the God relationship we have. I was listening to a sermon the other day on the Song of Songs, and you've also written a book on the matter.
It's my thing.
Altogether Beautiful. Plug. And what I heard from Justin Krupski, the senior pastor at Trinity Utica, a Lutheran church here in Michigan, he said, there should be a big gap between the culture and the church on this issue of sexuality.
Particular issue,
right?
Yeah.
But that's not really the case in practice. Yeah. The church seems to have rules, but if we don't follow those rules, and if we, and the more important thing here, I think, if we don't discuss those, why do we even have them? And so that's where I think, if we're going to look at the way the culture talks about sexuality and love, real love, they're talking about it going all the way to elementary school. I mean, my kids are grappling with relationships and love, and they're in 1st, 2nd, and 7th grade, and they're having these conversations. And so if the church remains silent and doesn't actually speak to some of these things, then my kids are going to be discipled by the world. And I would much rather have them be discipled by Jesus. They're learning right now. Are we going to have an opportunity to share what God says on the issue? And that's where I think our conversation today, I'm most hopeful, sparks some conversations in the homes of the people who are doing the study.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I like that language you said, like, who are we really being discipled by? Because we always are learning about these things. And there's a big difference between picking up what the culture's putting down, just like doing that really casually, and not connecting with the culture. Those are two ends of the pendulum we don't want. Instead, let's find the ground where Jesus always is in the Gospels in particular, where God always is in his scripture, where he's connecting to the culture, where he's like super aware of what's going on in the culture. He can call it out like nobody's business, right?
He's never surprised.
Never surprised, right? And I don't think we should be either. It's a dark world, and there's going to be a lot of, I want to curse so badly, like there's going to be a lot of mess, I guess, right? There's so much stuff that is gross out there, I guess, that we have to wade through. But let's do it in life together in the church. Let's ask the hard questions. And let's be ready for some healing to come in. Because certainly I think we've stayed silent. We've also entered into shaming without, like really attaching to grace, which is where, ironically, the attachment is of relationship, is in that grace in healing. So what is the issue? Let's start there. What kind of love is out there? What does God tell us about love? What is real love? And then what do you think the culture is saying, Matt?
I think when we see God's words for us about love, I actually believe his most clear expression for his love for us is found in Song of Songs, and it's titled Altogether Beautiful. It's in Song of Songs 4 verse 7. You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you. And this is something that when we hear it from God, we struggle to receive it. We struggle as fallen human beings, as just people. Like I think you could talk to anyone about insecurity, and you could say, hey, do you really feel beautiful? Do you feel handsome? I mean, are there things about yourself that there's no flaw in you? I can't even look myself in the mirror, as ruggedly handsome as I am, and
totally right.
And say, right,
where's Liz to confirm?
Upstairs, right, laughing at me. There's just no way, and whether it's a male body issue, like I wish I could bench more or lift more or run faster or jump higher or anything like that, whether it's I wish I looked better in a suit, I wish I looked better blank, whether it's a female issue with the the myriad of issues that exist in both genders. Do we hear the word from God, you're altogether beautiful? Yeah. And believe him.
Right. And believe him. And believe that he sees that enough. I mean, it pokes at that flaw thing. It just pokes and pokes at the shame that we have inside because of sin. It's going to be there. Do we believe we're beautiful enough, worthy enough is what that word is saying, right? Worthy enough to send Jesus to heal it, And
then from there, I think, the thing you talk about in your book very, very clearly is, do the issues we have with ourselves affect the way that we see other people? And in those relationships that we have, can I be best friends with another guy like Jonathan and David and be totally vulnerable to say to another guy, hey, I have issues with this. I need to be able to be real with you about, I first saw this when I was this age, or the very real struggles we have with, I think pornography, addiction to pornography, addiction to what that is, and just the total lie that it sells us, that there is a devaluing of the image of God, and just the true love relationship that he gives us. And increasingly in our world today, pornography is not a male-centered issue. It is a human-centered issue. My sons and daughters are almost equally as likely to be vulnerable to pornography. It's why I put something on my network that prevents any sort of, and it's helpful because I'm a nerd, and if you've got questions about that, I can help you out later. But we put something on the network that prevents my kids from accessing pornography, but it also prevents anyone from accessing pornography. So if I have an issue or Liz has an issue, that's something that no matter what, there's a roadblock in place to even prevent the temptation of it. And
one thing you pointed out, I'm sorry, man, I feel like I'm interrupting you a lot today. One thing you pointed out is, I think whenever you mention the word vulnerability, and this is just coming to me like in this moment, because I'm like, whoa, that's insightful. When you mention that word vulnerability, we almost always are culturated to take it to sexuality. So when you said, can I be vulnerable with another man? What do you think people are thinking?
Can I share some of that issue, that sexuality issues that I have?
Well, I think what people are thinking is like, well, if I'm vulnerable with another man, people are going to think I'm gay. Oh, I think that's a real issue for men in particular. And, we're not going to get into like the deep and heart of that particular issue. But at the same time, I think that's a problem, because it's the same thing in friendship, even between male and female. If I'm vulnerable, then our culture says we go to sexuality, right? Yeah. Whereas, like, we're friends, we tell each other stuff all the time. We also have, like, stuff into play where, like, I was just talking to Liz, and we do, we talk in public places. You know what I mean? We're not idiots about it. But we have to be able to have relationships that aren't sexual. But I think when we think of the word vulnerable, that's where our culture takes it. And there is so much more in real love to vulnerability than that. And it's like, it's total crap that's what we think of. Like, that's such a small piece of our lives, our sexuality. It's good, but it's not all that.
I see, and that's where I would say that the greatest, I would maybe even disagree with you there. The greatest gift, right? The greatest gift that God has given the human race is sex between husband and wife.
Well,
there is no.
The greatest gift? I don't think I agree.
The greatest gift in its purest form. I'm not saying like checked out sex where, but the greatest gift God's given anyone is that perfect union. The renewing of the marital covenant is right there, and there's nothing better than when you are totally sold out to your wife in such a way that she is. I mean, can you remember that time you saw Dave as flawless? Right? There's no flaw in him. It was the first time you saw him, and he's like, oh man, he's really handsome. He's got that goatee action. It's kind of deep and rugged, And Liz, I remember when Liz looked at me the first time, and I had hair, and and she said, man, all these people are good looking. And I was like, hey, I'm in this group. I'm good looking then. Yeah. And you've got this moment between husband and wife with the intention that it has, the oneness that it has. It's more than just physical. And that's where I think our issue with real love is that we've reduced sex at our peril to just being a physical interaction, which does not matter at all. And so I can swipe right on every single profile, and I can have sex with any single person I want. And we've reduced it to this purely physical interaction. I believe that's a failure for us, because when we look at the intimacy, the one-on-one, inseparable nature of this union, marriage is not your vows at the altar. That's not what unifies you. I mean, those words are wind, but it's that physical union that creates that oneness. And what we've been doing as a culture for a very long time now, and it's not just American culture, it's throughout time, we have been trading this union, this oneness, and we've been losing ourselves. We've been losing not only the physical part of ourselves, but the spiritual, the emotional, the mental. And Jesus even talks to this when he talks to the woman at the well, and he says, hey, it's too bad your husband's not here. And she's like, oh, I don't have a husband. He's like, actually, you had 5. And he looks at her, he pierces her, and he talks with her about faith and about this reality, and then, convicted in her heart, she is led to go and tell everyone she knows about this guy who told her everything she'd ever done, and it was restorative. And that's where
it's that altogether beautiful message of like, hey, there's no flaw in you. Like, this is a safe place. This is made perfect in me, is Jesus' message, And, I think part of that, Matt, goes into, so swing the pendulum for me, is that in our friendships, we believe that there's zero sexuality. And that's absolutely not true. Like, the attachment is both like spiritual, emotional, but there is some physicality to it. We are physical beings. And so I have to be able to, like, there is joy in like sitting with a person in friendship or hugging a person. Like, you know what I mean? And finding pleasure, I guess, in and not like sexual pleasure, not what's appropriate for marriage, but like, we only, I think, and there is a video about that in Altogether Beautiful, which I swear today we are not trying to sell that, but like it just keeps coming up. Matt is.
It's your book. I'll sell it to
he's my fan guy. But you know what I mean? Like, there's a video about how we need to like redefine pleasure God's way too, not just love, because we have stolen it for sex. And that is not the way that that's not all of it. You know what I mean? So firmly defining that we need attachments in all of our relationship. You know, God attaches to us in every realm in different ways. And marriage is, like you said, I think while I have to like process it a little bit more, you know, maybe we do disagree, but I think what you're saying is right on, that God did create this one place. And it you know, some of people who are single and will always remain single won't experience the fullness of that. But even in our marriages, you know, it's such a mystery, and I'm not sure we experience the fullness of it, right? Because
we can't, and we won't, because we live in a sin-filled world.
Right. And Christ, he's got his ideas, his thoughts are so much larger than ours, you know, and we can't fit it in a box. So some of those things that we wonder and we question about, it's such a good discussion, but we won't have an answer for. But I do know that the way we are currently attaching in our relationships is always either way too much or way too little. Like, you know, it's not cool. And part of that is because we leave God out. And guess what? He's always the center of anything that's real. Absolutely.
And I think this is where when we think about this relationship, real love, and marriage, marriage is a gift to men and to women, but it's a gift to all to show us that unity that we can't understand, that we have in Jesus. And I mean, the Bible's very clear that if you are single, you've been given a greater gift.
That's true.
Right? The reason I'm married is that I cannot live. I'm not about that single life. I am far too tempted. And I am far too tempted by sex, by sexuality, by everything regarding to that kind of fleshly nature to be, single Pastor Matt in the Catholic Church priest. Nope. Nope. Not
going to work for you.
Not going to work for me. And there are others who are gifted with the ability to say, hey, I don't need to be married. I am perfectly whole with Jesus as my everything.
It's like a crazy healthy place to be, right?
Paul's like, if this is you, celebrate and rejoice. And that's not to say that Paul isn't saying like there won't be longings, right? I think certainly I've known a lot of single people. I've had single people as mentors in my life, it's been an opportunity to say, okay, we're in totally different places and totally different situations, and yet I see there's a tremendous capacity and opportunity that you have to live in God. Your first duty and obligation is God. Your second duty and obligation is God. I got to worry about my wife. Sometimes I don't want to.
I know, right? I love the realness, Matt. I love it.
I got to worry about my kids.
Yeah.
Sometimes. No.
It's a lot.
Right? And so when you're in a situation where our culture, I think, frowns on that a little bit, unnecessarily, and even biblical culture, they were accused of frowning on that as well, and that's why Paul calls it out and says, no, that's a gift, and so we have to remember that everything that he gives us, everything God gives us in the marriage relationship, isn't first for that relationship, but it's to reveal a more profound, deep relationship we have with him. I mean, the oneness that a man and a woman experience in marital intimacy is even greater when you think about what God has with me and with you.
Right. And
it's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that is, our relationship with God is that absolute place of vulnerability. And, again, we're in a sinful world. And so I think to some degree we have no clue what vulnerable is with God in the way that we will, when he comes back for us, when we're in heaven, when we're with him again, However, I can't imagine living without that relationship with God, like as a part of my daily life, because that's the place I can be absolutely vulnerable. And how can I learn to be vulnerable in my other relationships? How can I learn to truly attach then? Because vulnerability is what attaches, right?
Right.
How can I do that without knowing that there is this absolute safe place? It must feel so unsettling all the time to not know if you're worthy, if you're accepted, to put on those fig leaves constantly for God and then for other people.
Yeah. What do and the fig leaves, the reference you make, Adam and Eve hiding themselves because they're embarrassed about it. I heard a talk this weekend. What would we be embarrassed about if there was a screen behind us that showed every inner deep thought that we had in our head? I mean, we wouldn't walk out in public. We would hide from everyone. We'd all be hermits if the inner thoughts of our hearts and minds were revealed to other people.
Yeah, it's so true.
And I think this is where, it's very important that God speaks about real love. God speaks about the relationship between man and woman. God speaks about the struggle and just the everyday nature of the brokenness that's within us. I will never be able to love my wife as Christ loves the church, even though I'm commanded to and encouraged to and shown how to. Right. I will never be able to replicate or emulate or do anything like that. That's why I need God. I need God to love her for me. I need God to love me for me. And so, when we think about, are we willing to talk about this? And I think for so long we've been treating these issues, particularly with real love, with sex, with pornography, with attachment, with proper relationships between men and women, men and men, women and women. We've been kind of like, oh no, well, we're not going to really talk about that one. We're going to leave that one aside. And if the pastor does talk about it, let's hope he talks about it in a way that, we're just kind of, he's talking about someone else this week, and I'll just check out. But God speaks to this, and it's time that we ask two questions. And the first question is, what was said to you? When you were growing up, when you were dealing with this issue, what was said to you? And then the follow-up question is, what are you going to say to the next generation? What words of life are you willing to share with those people who follow after you so that you can encourage them toward faithfulness? And this isn't about just saying, like, don't ever have sex, don't ever do this, don't ever no this is, I believe it, this is the greatest gift God has given us, and it's a true unity between man and a woman, but it's a unity to be understood in its proper context. That's where the gift we have of faith, the true number one gift, I guess my gift is the best gift between humans, our number one gift, right? Best gift between humans, best gift between the divine.
I feel so much better now.
best vertical gift,
yeah, right.
faith. Best horizontal gift, sex. Okay, so it's a 1-2, and so you've got this opportunity to say, hey, can we talk about this? And we're doing a sermon series based on your book, Altogether Beautiful. I am here for you.
Wow,
But really, I'm here for the church because we've got to talk about this.
I know. I feel we have to
shed. We've got to shed this insecurity we have to tell our sons and daughters, like, there is a way you should treat a woman. And women, there are ways that men should treat you. And if they don't, we need to talk about it. The Me Too movement need not be swept under the rug and said, oh no, that's insignificant, it doesn't matter. No, if my daughter and my wife have experienced these issues, like, I want to destroy. I don't want to dismiss.
Right.
I want to go to battle for, because that's exactly what Jesus did. He goes and fights for the men and for the women, and he dies. It costs him his life so that he would be restored. And this is where, for me, like, when Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6, as a preamble to this chapter, talking about love, he says, you are not your own, for you were bought with a price, and the price was the precious blood of Jesus. All of the brokenness I have in my life was covered by the blood of Christ. All the brokenness that I have given to other people has been covered with the blood of Christ. He restores all things, and he takes this ruined relationship that we have with him and this ruined relationship that we have with each other, and he puts it all back together as if it was never broken in the first place. And this is how we can see God and how much he cares about us is in real love, because he is the source of real love.
Anything real. Yeah, and I think, we're out of time, but I think recognizing that piece of restoration, like, that's so important. And you said it over and over and over again. All of these topics we're talking about, so rarely will it ever be right the first time. Like, we all hold inside of us so much of the brokenness of sexuality in our culture. We hold so much of the brokenness of no vulnerability in our culture. All of that stuff that we talked about, like, that is part of our inner being that Christ has taken, and he has taken all those shattered pieces and restored them completely. And like you said, that's the message of Song of Songs 4:7, like, no flaw. He makes altogether beautiful, and he makes altogether worthy, altogether holy. We don't need to do that. We're never going to be able to do that. And so when we read 1 Corinthians 13, when we walk away from this study, we know that he's the center, but we also know that he's capable of doing it every day in our life. And the freedom in that is unbelievable. So we just encourage you to go love real, love brave.
And that's the thing. And to wrap up, there was one thing I wanted to share with anybody out there who is struggling with their history, their past. I struggle with it. And one thing that profoundly impacted me was a short 4-minute talk by Matt Chandler, and it's entitled "Jesus Wants the Rose." We're going to put a link to it in the notes of this episode. I would really encourage you. I know this episode is long. I know we've gone a little bit over the time we normally spend. I'd encourage you, take 4 more minutes. If you have been struggling, if you're wrestling with addiction, if you're wrestling with your past and your history, Jesus loves you, and there's nothing that separates you from that love. And Matt Chandler has a phenomenal word. God bless you. Matt Chandler has a phenomenal word to share with you, and how real and deep that love goes.
That's awesome. Thanks, Matt. I think a usable resource is always useful at the end of a video, because we just unpacked so much, So I just encourage our listener to go out and love brave. Ask yourself that question: who and how am I going to go love brave this week? What does that have to do with this particular issue of real love? We'll see you next time.
Have a good one.